Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
And we're going to go ahead and share the screen. There we are. Okay. So we are in the midst of a complaint on the part of what appears to be the entire community, starting off with the people who happened to join the Israelites when they left Egypt, that there was this mixed multitude of people who joined them, plus the Israelites themselves, who then started to complain again. And they are complaining about the fact that they have no meat, and they're complaining about the specific vegetables, etc., that they got, including onions and garlic, that they got free in Egypt. And yesterday, Rashi explains the rabbinic interpretation that free did not mean no expense. It meant they were free from mitzvot. They were free from commandments. So let's keep going. Va'ata, and now, or but now, nafshenu yevesha, our souls are dry. Ein kol, there's nothing. Bilti, except for El Haman Einenu, except for the manna which we see, right? That's in our eyes, right? All we can look at. In other words, what this entire phrase means, that all we can look at is the manna. Okay, so El Haman Einenu. And Rashi adds a little bit of a dray to this. He says Mina Shachar ad Min Ha'erev, whether it's in the morning or whether it's in the evening, that's all we have, the manna. Okay, so going on. Vahaman Kizra Gadhu, and the manna was like a coriander seed. Ve'eno ke'en habdolach, and its appearance was like delium, is how we would translate that. But Rashi gives us maybe a clearer explanation of that word as crystal. It looked like crystal. So first of all, as this goes on, right here we have the direct speech of the Israelites. And then the Torah continues on with a statement that is not their statement. This is not, and Rashi's going to point that out. This is not coming from the Israelites. This parenthetical note, you might say, is not from the Israelites. That's not what they were saying. Va'aman kezeragad, right? And the manna was like a coriander seed. Misha amar zeh, the person who said this statement, lo amar zeh, did not say the other statement. These are not coming from the same source. Yisrael omrim bilti el Haman einenu. The Israelites were the ones who were saying, all we have to look at is the manna. V'akadosh Baruch Hu, but the Holy One, blessed be He, Hichtiv b'Torah, He wrote into the Torah the statement, V'haman kazeragad v'gomer, that the manna was like the coriander seed, etc. Klomar, and this is the point, that is to say, Re'u ba'e olam, look, O inhabitants of the world, al ma shetlonanim banai, look at what my children are complaining about. And look at this. The manna, in fact, was like this. Hu chashuv was considered. Gezeragad. So now Rashi gets into the actual words themselves and their own difficulties, right? So what do we mean by zeragad? He says agul, it's round. Kegida, zera, like this coriander seed. And here he has in French, coriander. And here it is in Yiddish, de coriander. And he says, eine planta, or plantza, which means a certain kind of plant, in case you're not familiar with coriander. Going on, bedolach, Shem Even Tova, it's the name of a precious stone, and here we have crystal. I actually think I might have had a picture of delium, and at least the picture that they have of it, it's actually quite brown in color, and it is a crystal of sorts. So onwards. Shatu ha'am, the people, the nation would spread out, v'laktu, and they would collect it. V'tachanu v'reichayim, it was ground in a mill, or dachu bimducha, or it was pounded in a mortar, uvishlu b'ferud, or it was cooked in a vessel or a dish, v'asu oto ugot, and it was made into cakes. V'hayat tamo, and its flavor was katam lashad hashamen, and this lashad hashamen would be, as it were, I think I've seen cakes of honey, something like that, but it was like moist honey or something like that.
Well, I mean, it says here oil cake.
Oil, sorry, Shemin. Yeah, okay, oil cakes. Yeah, good. Donuts.
Well, I mean, I don't know where you're getting honey from because that would
Sorry,
be
I'm sorry.
dvash.
Forgive me. That was the Vash. That was later on. Yes.
I've
So
got rich cream.
yes.
Well,
Okay.
fat. I mean, shemen is fat or
It
oil.
is. That's correct.
Mhm.
So it does mean oil, and Rashi's going to tell us that it can't mean fattened. Okay. Sorry, I don't know why I had. We'll see. We'll see why I got honey in a moment. Okay. Let's go on with this. All right. Let's go on into the Rashi now. But that's where I got the honey. Okay. Let's see. Find the place. Okay. Shatu. So ein shayit, this word shayit, ela lashon tiul. It means to wander, right? And here's this, whatever this is in French, I cannot make out any sort of sense of what this is. And Lauren, you may have it that way.
Yeah, and also my Rashi on this one has vowels and it says shiut.
Oh, because this is a yud here, right? Okay. Either way, it means
Yeah,
to
I see what you're
wander or
saying. Yours
wander
has two
around.
yuds.
Yeah. I
No,
mean,
okay.
they don't look like a misprint here. Sometimes
And
they
the
don't.
the French word it
Yes.
says Esbaneyr.
Isbanye. I don't know. Anyway, here's the Yiddish, right? Herum schweifen, right? To wander around is what I imagine that means. I'm not that familiar. Herum means around, right?
And here it says taking a stroll.
Yes. Okay. Nice. But the point is, it's relaxed.
Yeah,
Male without any effort. It was like
right.
helping yourself, going into that supermarket and not even having to check out, just helping yourself. V'tachanu bareichayim, etc. And it says, so the Hebrew seems to mean they ground it in a mill, etc. And he says, however, Rashi points out, this is the obviously rabbinic tradition, right? Lo yarad bereichayim, right? And here it means it never got lowered into a mill. V'lo b'kedera, nor did it get put into this dish or this pot. V'lo b'meducha, nor did it get put into a mortar. Ela mishtaneh hayatamo. The point of this text is that it's supposed to mean that its flavor would adapt itself, would change, lenitchanin, to something that was ground, or linduchin, or something that was boiled or cooked. Niduchin would be pounded. Forgive me, pounded, ulemavushalim, and to something that was cooked. And that's the point. That the idea that the manna changed and altered its texture and its flavor depending on whatever you wanted it to be, essentially. So this word perud is not a common word. Let me find it. Parud, here it is. I needed to see the vowel there. Parud. So he said it's not a common word. One reason I mispronounced it, right? Kedera, it means a dish. Okay, here we go. So Lashad Hashemin. So that's or Hashamin. So this is difficult, and he's going to tell you that there are some various opinions as to what this means. Yes, David.
So Yeah. So when I was curious about this when we went through this before. So when they talk about, it could be transformed into whatever texture or whatever you wanted it to be,
Mhm.
how did that happen? I mean, is that like they prayed and it converted into what they wanted, or that's the part I was just curious.
So I'm okay. So because you asked me the question, I'm going to visualize it like this. This morning I think I want French toast. Help myself to the manna. Guess what it tastes like? French toast.
Oh,
So in other words, sort of whatever you felt you wanted it to be, it was. It was like,
okay.
yeah, that would first of all, okay, obviously miraculous, but then
Yeah.
the very presence of the manna was miraculous. And I think it also has to do, if I were to push this a little further, and I think part of what it's trying to say to us is, I'm right now, of course, living in a home where the garden is amazing. And as you know, all these different flowers and fruits and things like that, that there's something miraculous about it as well. And seeing it as a miracle in some ways has more to do with our perception than it has to do with the nature of the thing itself. Because if our perceptions were otherwise, we might see life itself and the reality that we experience as actually being one huge miracle. And I think that that's part of the point.
Okay.
What
Okay.
what constitutes a miracle? That's the question, right?
hmm
And that has more to do with how we choose to look at it.
Yeah, and then of course, what's a small miracle versus a large miracle?
Yeah,
All those
that's
kinds of
true. That's
follow
true.
on
That's true.
de- decomposition questions. Okay, but I understand your point. Okay,
Right.
we'll leave it to that, and thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. Leshad Hashamin. So he explains, lichluach shel shemen. In other words, the moisture of oil. Kach pirshu dunas. Dunash is a teacher of Rashi's, whom he mentions. Now, I think his whole name was Dunash Lavrat, and whether Rashi either read his works or actually studied with him, I'm not sure. I'm fairly certain that Dunash wrote some kind of early commentary. Whether that's extant or not, I do not know, but Rashi quotes him a number of times as his teacher, and he says this is how Dunash explains this. Vedomelo, and he says there's a similar expression in Psalm 32, which says Nehepach lashdi, I think is what it is. Okay, Becharvune kai. It's also a very difficult phrase, but essentially, lashdi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly,
Well,
is
it says
marriage.
Lishadi.
Lishadi. Okay, Lishadi. Thanks. Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate your keeping me on target.
And it cites the Dunash as Teshuvot Dunash, page 14.
Okay, so apparently it is extant. Thank you for that too. It's good. It's good. Okay, so my marrow has changed. Nepach has altered. Becharvonei kayetz, in the droughts of summer. Okay. V'halamed, in other words, the lamed of lishad, because le, we know, can be a prefix meaning to. And Rashi says this lamed yesod, it's part of the root of the word itself. Lishad is the word.
Lishadi.
Yeah. Well, lishadi means my marrow. So the e at the end is
Okay.
a familial suffix. Okay.
Okay.
So ne'pach lachluchi. So he's explaining my moisture has changed, has altered becharvonei kayetz, in the droughts of summer. So that's one. So he likes Dunash's interpretation. V'rabotenu pirshuhu. However, our sages explained it in the Sifrei. So this is one opinion by the rabbis, Lashon Shadayim. So they wanted to interpret this as so they would say that it would be that this lashad here is in this sentence, it has to do with breast. They understand it as breasts. Ach ein, but Rashi is critical. He says, Ach ein inyan shadayim etzel shemen. He says it doesn't make sense to be speaking about breasts with regards to oil. That's not what breasts are there for. Ve'if sharlomar, and you cannot say l'shade. So in other words, hashamein. In other words, taking instead of hashemen, meaning oil. So it's in other words, to try and translate it as a fat breast. In other words, a breast capable of all kinds of nurturing, of nourishment, and that's why they went in that way, because of the manna being essential nourishment for them. But he says it doesn't, you can't say that. Okay, lashon, in other words, using the type of terminology, vayishman yeshurun, right? In other words, Jeshurun became fat. She'im kain, because if this were the case, and now he goes deeper into the grammar of the words themselves, haya hamim. So we're taking a sleigh ride here, a grammatical sleigh ride. So if that were the case, the mem, right, of shemen, right, of shemen, would nakud kamatz katan, would be as shamein. In other words, that the a of shamein, the ta'amo lamata. In other words, the accent would fall on the last syllable, shamein. Tachat hamem, okay. In other words, it would fall underneath the mem, shamein. Achshav, but now here in this sentence, shamin nakud patach katan, but here where this mem is pointed with a segol, right? He calls it a patach katan. He uses a different term for it. V'hatam tachat hashin, and the accent falls on the shin because remember, let's take a look at it. Look at this. This is the accent mark right there, that vertical line. Hashamen. Not hashamein, but hashamen. Okay, slight, subtle difference, I suppose, right? Lashon shemenhu. We have to translate this as oil. V'hashin hanekuda b'kamatz gadol. And he says the fact that the shin here is pointed with a kamatz gadol. There's the kamatz gadol, right? Shamen. Eina nekuda pepatach katan, and it doesn't have a segol. It doesn't say shemen. It says shamen. Mipnei shehu sof pasuk. It has to do with the pausal form of the noun, and we find this all over the place, right? That a segol changes into a kamatz at the end of a sentence. Okay. Davar acher, another interpretation. Okay. Lashad Hashamin. Excuse me. Notarikon. So another way in which they wanted to interpret this was that it was an acronym, Notarikon. So it is. I think it could be Lush. This could be a misprinted Yud. Lauren, how does yours read
Mine
there?
says leash.
Leash. Okay, thank you. So it is a Yud. Lish, Shemen, Dvash. There's the honey here, right?
Mhm.
So in other words, Lamed, Shin, Daled. So that the Lashad is actually an acronym for Lish, Shemen, Dvash. In other words, oil and honey kneaded together. Ke'isa, this is like a dough. Hanelusha b'shemen, that was kneaded with oil. Uktufa bidvash, and smeared with honey. The Targum shel Onkelos, he says, but let's go all the way back to the Targum, to Onkelos's Aramaic translation. The Mitargem, who translated it in Aramaic as Delish b'mishcha, means you can see the cognate here, okay? Mishcha, right? You see Mashiach, or anointed. So it's more, the word Mashiach is related to the cognate Aramaic, meaning, right, kneaded with, or a dough of oil. Noter lepitrono shel dunash. He obviously is leaning towards the interpretation of dunash. Sha'isa hanilusha b'shemen, because a dough that has been kneaded with oil, lachluchit shemen yeshba. It has clearly the moisture provided by the oil. So let's stop here, because we are going to go on then. We'll have to wait until next year, God willing, in terms of how Moses is going to have to react to all of this. And actually we'll be on the page, on the previous page, right here. Okay, let me do one more. Sorry, I'll do one more verse, and then we'll go to verse 10. Uveredet hatal al hamachaneh, and when the dew lay down on the, or rested on the, or came down on the camp, Lila, at night, Yered Haman alav, the manna would fall on it. So the manna would fall on top of the dew. So obviously it would stay nice and clean. And I'm just simply going to take this and move it down here. And at that point, that's the point. We'll pick this up next year. So I'm going to stop the share here. Okay. All right.
And moist. It would
Yes.
stay moist. There you
Yes, it was. That's true. That's true.
I had a question. Well, I had a question in the chat.
Yeah, I saw that.
So who decides what it tastes like?
So
The cook or the eater?
So you
And what
asked
if you invite people over who don't like it at all?
Okay, so I love these questions, Golda. They are amazing questions. Okay, so I'm
trying to deal with my inner Harlan.
You're deconstructing even more. Okay, so here goes. I think what happened was, if it was going to be a miracle to begin with, right? You wanted to be French toast, fine. You wanted to be sunny side up, fine. You wanted to be an omelet, cheese omelet, it's yours. So. Right. I don't know that the cook necessarily was the one to determine, but that, he put out the manna, put the manna in front of every person, and whatever they personally wanted, they got. So here's the point. I think that every single person got an omer's worth every day, because if you go back to the Exodus passage where the man in Beshalach, in Parsha Beshalach, where manna is mentioned every day, there were rules about it. And that's part of what they didn't like. They didn't like the fact that there were rules associated with getting the manna. The actual physical,
you only got so much.
That's correct. And you couldn't get more, and you shouldn't get more, and you couldn't go and collect it on Shabbos.
Now that makes a lot of sense.
Right. And you didn't leave over, you didn't have leftovers. I mean, none of these things. And of course, these are all things that people obviously tried. And I think there's a huge human nature lesson in all of that too. So, okay, I'm going to stop the recording right now.